call to order the meeting of the directors of the New York Convention Center Development Corporation for Wednesday, April 19th, 2017. I would like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. The directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask any questions at any time. Please note that we welcome public comments on the items on the following agenda. To ensure maximum opportunity for participation, speakers representing themselves may speak for up to 2 minutes each, and those representing groups may speak for up to 4 minutes with one speaker per group. Speakers' comments may only address the items considered at today's meeting. Before we begin the substantive portion of the meeting, I would like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on today's agenda.
Can I ask a question concerning that to council? We're going to consider pre-approved counsel, right, at today's meeting. There are some counsel on that list with whom I have an active relationship. Does that result in a conflict?
I mean, your relation personal
in my personal business life, there are some members of our pre-approved list with whom I am actively, currently involved.
So I think you should recuse yourself.
Okay.
Okay, if so, I would ask you to please make appropriate disclosure on the record, as David has just done at this time, and we will then be sure that you may recuse yourself from any discussion or vote with regard to such item or items. Is there anyone else who would wish to be recused from any items? If not, the foregoing having been noted for the record, I'd like to note that the minutes for the October 26, 2016 directors meeting remain in preparation and are not yet available for your approval, but they will be available for approval at our next meeting. With that, our soon-to-be president, Robin Stout, will present the first item on today's agenda, which relates to the appointment of officers of the corporation. Robin?
Thank you, Henry. I never presume, so let me present this item. And also, we will have several minutes for you at the next meeting. I've been a bit behind on getting to those. But this first item relates to the making sure that CCDC has a full slate of officers with which to conduct corporate affairs. Just so I'm not remiss, the very first thing I should say how sorry I am that Sarah St. Amand has decided to move on. We should recognize that Sarah accomplished a number of very important tasks in her tenure, not the least of which were 3 very important contracts that will drive CCDC forward for several years to come. The first was getting the transformer building started as the early work to kick off the expansion. Second, and most importantly, was the signing of the design-build contract with Lend-Lease Turner. And third was the execution of the project management agreement for owner's rep services to oversee the expansion on behalf of the owner, CCDC. I'm going to speak about each of these points in the President's report shortly to come, but these constitute a tremendous legacy for Sarah, of which I think we should all be proud. But now, of course, the job is to follow up on and actually implement that legacy, so we have our work to do. Accordingly, this first item is to designate a full slate of officers for CCDC operations. I would take Sarah's place as CCDC president. I've had a chance to introduce myself, I think, to everyone at the table, at least over the phone, if not in person. I have been at ESD for many years, as is recited in the board materials, in both executive and legal capacities. The remainder of the slate hold similar titles at ESD. Many of them are here in the room today. They hold those titles not only at ESD, but also at many other ESD subsidiaries. And they would hold those titles ex officio, meaning that the actual holder of that office would be a successor if that office changes. As I discussed with several of you, additional CCDC staff may be advisable in the future, but any such retentions would return to you, the directors, for your consideration. I'm happy to take questions on this item, but otherwise the directors are being asked to appoint the slate of officers as set forth in your materials. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the directors or from the public? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, the motion carries. I'll now ask Robin to present his presentation. I will note for the record that this item is being presented for your information only, and no vote is required.
Before we get to that, could I just raise a point of clarification on the last item?
Yeah, sure.
I admit that in reading it, I didn't really focus on the ex officio question. It's my understanding of the corporate bylaws that even though the person is serving ex officio, if a person were to leave, for example, let's say for the sake of discussion that Liz Fine were to leave as general counsel, that the next general counsel would not be an officer of the corporation without a new action approving the new general counsel. Is that correct? Or is this a lifetime approval of the general counsel of ESDC as the general counsel of the Javits
Of CCDC.
CCDC. I believe that our current bylaws require a board action to approve the appointment of an officer, and not merely of the position of somebody serving in that position.
No, I understand the distinction. I don't know if we have the answer, but we can get back to you with the answer.
I'm going to have to get back to you because I don't have the bylaws here with me.
Can we just clarify? Can we just clarify that as to what exactly just happened? I would like to say I think the board
Sure.
should. The point's made.
And obviously, to the extent that positions would turn over, we would inform you of that, and to the extent the board action is necessary, we would take that.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
On to the President's report. Thank you very much. We thought it best to organize the agenda in terms of appointing a president before there was a President's report, so that's why the agenda is a bit disjointed. For my President's report, I'd just like to report on the state of the construction, starting first with the Transformer building. If you haven't been over to Javits lately, I definitely recommend that you go. The Transformer building is topped out. I was surprised myself, but it's a 3-story steel structure. That steel structure has been topped out. There's a very nice ceremony with the iron workers not long ago where they signed the beam and hoisted it up. So the actual skeleton of the Transformer building is complete, and now, of course, the project is to fill it in and make it work. Later in the board materials, as the last item today, we will talk about Tishman's role in building that facility. They are acting currently as agent, and that is the contract pursuant to which the Transformer building has been rising and the development is coming along. We will ask your authorization to change the nature of that representation. And the other thing I should mention is that J2A, who is the architect for the Transformer building and has been a long-time architect and a direct contract with CCDC, J2A is there on site and having finished its design, making sure that the construction matches the design as it moves forward. The critical one critical note about the Transformer building is that, of course, because it's a crowded footprint down on the expansion site, it will be important that the Transformer building try to get out of the way of the DB, the design build expansion project, as I've described to several of you. So there is an important milestone about a year from now when the Transformer building would essentially be closed in, so that there no longer has to be no longer cranes or hoists around the exterior of it, and that it'll take another year essentially to finish the interior of it. But once we have closed off the shell and have only interior work to do, then it will be out of the way of the DB project, which is going to be, of course, extremely important. As far as the expansion project itself and our contract with the design builder Lindleys Turner, you may recall, I'm sure you do, that in January you authorized execution of a contract with Lindleys Turner. That was signed on February the 9th, and it has been subject to Attorney General and Office of State Comptroller review since that time. We've been working very actively with both the Attorney General and the Office of State Comptroller. We believe the issues have been narrowed considerably. And I actually really shouldn't say issues, but questions that in a contract of this size, questions have come up and have been answered. I would say at this point the list of remaining questions is very narrow, and we expect both an AG and an OSC approval for that contract imminently, shortly, and we will certainly be off and running at that point. However, it is important to know that even without that contract, without an effective contract, Lindleys Turner has been actively working. They are we have a written understanding with them that they are working at risk, which they fully understand, However, they've been very gracious, and they have been doing a considerable amount of work, starting first with the design. The proposal that they presented, which was the basis for their winning bid, was about 30% or so designed. That design continued. David Thurm, who I'll talk about in a moment, for our project manager, has been working with Lindley's Turner to advance that design. I was at a design meeting with Lindley's Turner and its architect, TVS, not too long ago. So even though there's not effective contract, that work is continuing, and we expect to be able to hit the ground running when we have the AG and the OSC approval, and still are on target to start actual construction of the expansion project this fall. And in the meantime, the other thing we are doing is, again, to make sure we can hit the ground running, is making sure we have our invoice process and our payment processes lined up. There are ESD accounting people who are here who will help tremendously with that, and I really appreciate that. The first thing the director should recognize is that the very first payment will contain a mobilization payment, both for work done but also projected work over the next 6 months or so, which is 4% of the total contract value. So we're preparing ourselves to receive the appropriate invoice from Lindley's Turner virtually the day after the project, the contract becomes effective, so that we can promptly pay it pursuant to the schedule set forth in the contracts. So we have the transformer project, we have the expansion project, and we have someone to help us oversee both of those projects, which is a project manager, David Thurm, who I think you had been introduced to the directors at the last meeting. David and I meet regularly, sometimes several times a day, and we'll look forward to continuing that relationship. David's been of great assistance in overseeing Lindley's Turner, and to the extent that that work will impact the transformer work, also working with that as well. I will not forget that the reason that CCDC exists is create a functional corporation convention center for Allen Steel and the operating corporation. So
for the operating corporation, not for me personally.
For all of us in New York. I am looking for. I've met with Alan several times already. Looking forward to continuing a close relationship with him. Alan and his team have been involved in the design meetings with Lindley's Turner and its architect. Alan and his team will continue to be involved on a very close basis as we move forward, so that we all have the expansion that we expect and will be proud of. In that vein, we also are meeting with DASNY, who you may recall will be the permitting agency for the expansion. David and actually Eunice were in Albany, I think just yesterday, to meet with the Department of State, because to the extent DASNY will be the permitting authority, but the Department of State will actually grant variances. So we wanted to meet that team with DASNY, and Eunice and David did that yesterday. I was not able to attend, but I appreciate the fact that they were there. So we expect to have a very tight team going forward in terms of whatever permitting and variances there might need to be. And Peter, you should recognize that the permitting will be to city code, and we'll have further conversations with City Department of Buildings as to how to move forward and coordinate that.
Perfect.
The last thing I have for my president's report would be to report that we have begun our outreach to the community. I've already met twice with the community board, once with David and with Alan together. Just this coming Friday, we will meet with what's called our community advisory group. Pursuant to our statute, we're required to have a community advisory group so that we can inform the public of what our activities are, and they can, of course, comment. That would consist, importantly, of the electeds in the area. So that meeting will take place on Friday. But we have begun our outreach to the communities. Alan has certainly done his outreach to the community for many years, and CCDC, as part of this expansion project, will be reaching out to the community to keep them fully informed of what we're doing. And I'd be happy to take questions, but that's my president's report for now.
Any questions from the board or from the public? Thank you for your report. If not, we'll continue with the agenda. Robin will now request authorization for the corporation to adopt an annual operating and capital budget for the fiscal year 2017-2018.
So here's the first of what may be several apologies, but I'm trying to coordinate the activities here. part of what was distributed to you did not have the actual operating budget, which is one page, and the actual capital budget, which is one page. I believe the hard copy had the complete set, and the electronic copy, if that's what you were working off of, missed these 2 pages. I missed that when I saw the electronic version go out. I apologize for that. But I'm happy to walk you through these in any detail that you need in order to try to move forward. On the what, David?
So, and thank you very much.
Sure.
I did get the electronic, and
Okay.
I missed it. Just in terms of the budget, I view this more as a spending plan than, in a way, than a budget, because what it doesn't show, and I wonder whether this is how we have always done it, is it doesn't show the sources of the funds. You mentioned in the item that it's funded in part from the hotel tax, in part from an anticipated appropriation, and in part from free funds. But is there any place where we actually can understand where this money is coming from?
Yes.
But it's not presented.
It's the source is not exactly paired with the use. That is correct. I'm happy to try to walk through that.
I wonder if just
and
as
others
it
can
could
help.
as a separate. I mean, I'm happy to vote on the spending portion of it, but I
yes.
do think it would be important that you circulate to the board a more
Yes, that exists, and
a presentation that shows where the money is, what monies are being used here, and where they're coming from. Because
yes.
it's not possible, obviously not possible to figure that out from the material.
Would it be helpful if Robin just walks us through that verbally right now?
Do you
I'd
know
be
the
happy to do
numbers
that.
off the top of
Yes,
your head?
and
Great.
Kathleen or others can help me with that. But yes, I would certainly be happy to do that.
That would be, if you could just discuss it, that would be great. And
Sure.
I'm more concerned on the obviously on the capital side than I am on
Yes.
the operating side, given the scale.
We should
of
all
the-
be close because so let me make the overview and then walk through it on piece by piece. But then again, just to refamiliarize the directors, on the front page of the materials themselves, the operating budget is funded with the unrestricted funds. They were. Let me take a step back. There are a small amount of unrestricted funds. There are 2015 hotel bond funds. There are 2016 hotel bond funds. And there is the $1 billion appropriation. So there's 4 sets of sources. Sound right so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So the entire operating budget will be funded with that first category, the unrestricted.
The entire operating budget, right?
entire operating budget.
For 2017-18 is $710,000.
Correct. So
right?
that entire operating budget comes from the unrestricted funds.
Which are how much at the moment?
Kathleen, do you know the answer to that question? How much are they?
Which of the pools is it coming from?
No, it's
No, but
and how much? How much it remains approximately?
How much remains? I'm not certain.
Multiples of that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Multiples
yeah,
of the
there's more
budget.
than- Oh, if you want affirmation on, David, on that, yeah, there's more than enough to cover that. It's residual over the years from the expansion, and we've kept it only for the operating portion of the budget.
And so we continue, so the budget is, we continue to say, we have a bunch of unrestricted money, and we're going to continue using that going forward
For the
for
operating.
the operating piece of the budget.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. And so could you then say how much is there, and when do we plan to run out?
There's several million in remaining.
So is that going to last us through the project?
Oh, definitely. I would say there's near 10 million.
$10 million? Okay, that's helpful.
That will cover the operating. And then for the capital, which obviously is a huge expense item, which I will explain, the capital we draw on all 4 of the sources, the unrestricted, 15, 16, and the appropriation. But let me go through this, and then we can go through in as much further detail as the directors would like. On the operating side, the one page that totals $710,000. The proposed salaries reflect most of my salary and the salary of one assistant. And under the non-personnel services, you'll see the line item for $214,000. That's for consultants as may be necessary in order to assist CCDC in project oversight. The remainder of that budget is simply customary expenses which have been rolled over from year to year. most of them, or many of them, CCDC payments to ESD for rental of space here, et cetera, which all subsidiaries do as a matter of course. Of course, the largest change occurs on the capital side, as I just said. That comes to $466 million for the coming year. And that's obviously given that the substantial construction of the expansion project will begin in this fiscal year. That 429, which is listed as construction costs, represents expenditures under all three of the major contracts that I discussed: the transformer building contract, the design build expansion contract, and the project manager contract, as calculated roughly on a proportional basis over the life of those contracts. The other costs set forth are ancillary to that overall expenditures, including CCDC insurance, CCDC council fees, etc. And again, I apologize for if this was not available to you. I'd be happy to walk through it in any further greater detail. Obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions. But otherwise, the directors are being asked to approve these, the operating and the capital budgets for the coming fiscal year.
Are there any other questions or comments from the directors or from the public? If not, we'll entertain a motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Second? All right, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. I'll now ask Eunice Jackson to present the next item on today's agenda, which relates to the adoption by the Corporation of Empire State Development Pre-Qualified Council list. Eunice, please begin.
Good afternoon, directors. ESD and its subsidiaries, including CCDC, implement and facilitate a number of large and complex economic development projects and initiatives. Given the nature and complexity and timing of these matters, ESD and CCDC often have a need for the assistance of outside counsel with varied expertise. To facilitate and expedite retention of such counsel, ESD's legal department maintains a list of pre-qualified counsel, which is updated from time to time. CCDC has traditionally adopted ESD's list. After extensive outreach and review by ESD staff, which is described more fully in your materials, on February 16th of this year, ESD's directors, upon the recommendation of staff, adopted a new list of pre-qualified counsel, which appears in your materials. The list is effective until March 2020, subject to a potential one-year extension at the discretion of ESD's general counsel. The directors are asked to adopt ESD's 2017 list of pre-qualified counsel for a period coterminous with the term of the ESD's list. Are there any questions?
Anything from the directors or from the public? If not, we'll entertain a motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The motion carries. Eunice, you'll also now please present the next item on today's agenda, which relates to the adoption of revised guidelines for the use, awarding, monitoring, and reporting of the corporation's procurement contracts. Please.
On an annual basis, the Public Authorities Law of New York State requires ESD and its subsidiaries to adopt guidelines for the use, basically procurement guidelines. The guidelines that you have included in your materials are the guidelines that were adopted by the ESD board on March 23rd of this year. There have not been any major substantive changes in the guidelines from the prior year guidelines, and I direct you to a summary within the materials of a few of the more notable changes. But essentially, the guidelines are pretty similar to the ones that we have in place now. So CCDC directors, you are asked to adopt the updated guidelines, the 2017 procurement guidelines for the upcoming year, for this year. Again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Anything from the public or the directors? If not, we'll take the motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is going to be presented by Robin and pertains to an authorization for the corporation to enter into a stipend agreement with a non-selected respondent for the design build works in connection with the Javits expansion project. Robin, please.
Yes, thank you. As the directors will recall, the RFP that was distributed by CCDC for procurement of the design build contract contemplated stipend awards for good faith proposals which were not ultimately selected. As part of our procurement process, ultimately 2 bids were received. As you will remember from your materials in January and as briefly recited in these materials before you today, both of the proposals that were received were very thoroughly vetted. They were evaluated by teams of experts. They were ultimately reviewed by a selection committee, and that led to the ultimate decision to recommend Lindley's Turner to you, and that contract you authorized in January. However, of course, there was a bidder that did not get selected. That second proposal was submitted by a Skanska joint venture. It was timely received, and pursuant to the evaluation process, it was deemed to be responsive to the RFP criteria. Skanska submitted the required executed stipend agreement, which it was required to do, and the form of that is attached to your materials. The stipend process itself is also set forth in your materials, but essentially, if you, the directors, approve this contract, Skanska must document its expenditures of qualified costs, which are defined in the materials, for CCDC to review. Upon review, and if CCDC approves, then CCDC would pay that stipend amount up to a maximum of $1.5 million. Just to be clear with the directors, CCDC has already made a preliminary review of what we expect would be the Skanska submission, and based on that initial review, it would appear likely that Skanska will be due the maximum $1.5 million. But we will go through the process as outlined in the materials. As set forth in your materials, after that payment to Skanska, CCDC will own all the relevant Skanska work product, and Skanska will have waived any claims it might have from the procurement process. Again, please let me know if there are any questions, but otherwise the directors are being asked to authorize CCDC to enter into this stipend agreement with Skanska on the terms and the conditions discussed.
Any questions or comments? Any questions from the public? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Thank you. The motion carried. The last agenda
Can I ask
item.
one question on
Yes,
that? Do we
please.
have a release, or will we get a release from Gilbane for the fact that they weren't deemed to be qualifying? They did submit a bid, but or do we not think that's necessary?
They did not submit a bid. They dropped out after the RFQ process. If you recall from your January materials, the RFQ process resulted in 3 potential bidders. The RFP went out to 3 potential bidders. David is speaking of the third. That third bidder, Gilbane, came to 1 or 2 initial meetings in terms of discussing the RFP, but then dropped out. So I don't believe we have a waiver or not, but certainly. I mean, David, as
There's
you know,
really no basis for them.
Okay,
That's all I want to know.
So and because they did not submit a final proposal, they have no entitlement to a stipend award.
Okay, the last agenda item relating to an authorization is to amend the contract with Tishman Construction for the transformer building construction. Robin will present that as well.
Yes, as I started off by saying, the transformer building project is well underway. The steel is up, and we are moving forward. The directors authorized that contract about a year ago in May of 2016. At that time, it was a contract for $8 million with Tishman Construction Corporation as agent to CCDC. What that meant was that Tishman was helping us in basically every aspect of the project. They were coordinating design, they were coordinating construction, they were coordinating bids, but they were only acting as our agent. And so, as Goldie can give you, she presented many of these to you. Ultimately, however, the responsibility for entering into the trade contracts was with CCDC, not with Tishman. We have managed to move forward over the course of the year and get a lot of work done. But in the course of getting that work done over the last year, I think both parties came to an understanding that really it would be better if Tishman took a more active role in managing this contract. So today before you, we are proposing that Tishman's status be moved from an as agent to an at risk. And what this will mean is that although in close coordination with us, Tishman will not only be reviewing design and scope of the bids, but doing the actual bidding and then signing the construction contracts. And so instead of CCDC paying the trades directly, we will be paying the trades through Tishman. So it's certainly eye-popping in your materials to see that this contract is going to go from $8 million to $95 million. But as also as set forth in your materials, the budget for the project has not changed. CCDC was planning to pay that $87 million otherwise, pursuant to all the contracts that Goldie had been bringing to you over the months. This will alleviate again the burden of budget and schedule risk residing with CCDC. It will now be transferred to Tishman. The essential terms of that agreement are set forth in your materials. Obviously, in order to entice Tishman to take that risk, they are entitled to reward. We have set forth in your materials how a maximum guaranteed price would be established, starting with 80% of market bids and moving forward through various pieces of a set formula. The final completion date for the transformer building is expected to be July 1, 2019. That's about 2 years from now. As I said to you, there's an important interim milestone about 1 year from now. The incentive that has been negotiated with Tishman in order for them to take this risk is also set forth in your materials at page 4 under shared savings, GMP incentive amount, and the incentive bonus. But I think of these in 3 different categories. The first is the shared savings, and Goldie will help me through this to the extent that folks have questions. But the first is that to the extent that there are savings beyond the expected budget from the procurement itself, Tishman will be able to share in 50% of those savings. To the extent that the GMP comes in under 91, Tishman will be entitled to share in some of those savings. And then there is an incentive bonus if they hit that interim milestone and the final milestone at the timely date that's been agreed to. And then on the other side of that coin is that there are liquidated damages if either the interim milestone or the substantial completion milestone are not met. I can go into further detail as much as you would like. I would draw one other thing to your attention. I know that a lot of complicated documents and materials come through you, and I just want to make sure you're aware of something that we've paid very close attention to, and I've discussed with several of the directors. The directors approved the initial construction management agreement with Tishman as our agent. Subsequent to that, the directors also approved the project management agreement with Tishman Construction Corporation, of which David Thurm is our project director. And now we are seeking your authorization to turn that construction management agreement into an at-risk. We understand that that means that Tishman has a role as a constructor of the transformer building. At the same time, it has a role as the oversight vehicle. We have thoroughly vetted that through legal counsel. We can explain in as much detail the structures that we would put in place in order to safeguard against that. A couple of essential things you should keep in mind is that under the project agreement that you authorized and that has been executed, although Tishman is our project manager, I think it is the owner's rep. Obviously, the owner's rep brings all things to the owner, so the owner ends up making decisions, not the project manager. And second of all, the main body of the work of the project manager will be to oversee the $1.3 billion expansion project. The project manager's oversight of the transformer building is really related to organizing a schedule so that the transformer building stays out of the way. So that in terms of prioritization, making sure that the transformer building gets done on a current and timely basis so that it stays out of the way of the expansion. So we can go into greater detail, as I say, both on the terms of the contract and or the terms of how we would mitigate this potential conflict. And with that, I would ask for the director's questions.
Questions, comments, questions from the public? If not, we'll take a motion for approval.
I do have a question.
Please.
First of all, I want to say I really appreciate the fact that the staff reached out to talk to me and other directors about this in advance. It's a complicated issue. In our conversations, I expressed a point that Mr. Chairman, that I think should at least be raised and understood, and that is that I do not feel comfortable with having an uncapped 5% construction management fee here, because it is not, in my opinion, we should be, if we're going to convert this into an at-risk project, we should not reward Tishman for the price getting higher. There should be, if something goes, if something goes wrong, or if the price, the guaranteed maximum price gets higher, they're going to continue to get their 5%. And it would seem to me that they should they should get 5% of a fixed price that we agree upon now, whether that's 5% of 91 million or whatever it happens to be, and because they should be bearing the risk that if it goes to $120 million, we should not be paying an additional fee for that additional $20 million. I know I'm not presenting this in the most coherent way, but
No, that's okay. No, and as you say, we appreciate having had the opportunity to discuss this, and Goldie will help me through. But it's important to recognize, as is set forth in the materials, that there's only one circumstance where the fee could be enhanced, which is under the GMP incentive. The fee is capped at 5%.
Right, but it's 5%. But the amount, 5% of what? That's not capped.
It's included in the 95 GMP.
Yeah,
right?
but what if the price gets? What if the GMP comes in, for the sake of discussion, at $120 million? Why should they get $6 million for that? What if we don't know the GMP? We hope it is, and maybe it will be less. Maybe it will be 87. That would be wonderful. But I don't understand why we should agree to a fee. Since we don't know what the GMP is going to be, and we're not going to know what it is until the bids come in, I don't understand why we should be agreeing to an uncapped 5%.
Again, I would get back to the fee is capped unless, as set forth in your materials, the GMP falls below 91. At that point, as an additional incentive on top of what we've already offered, they would be entitled to additional fees, which would be beyond the 5% cap.
Yeah,
but also, I think,
talking across.
well, I think we are too.
Yeah.
But also, David, I would point out to you, as you and I respectively discussed this before, that with increased risk comes increased reward. From my point of view, and I'm certainly very interested in the director's opinion about this, the big project is $1.3 billion of expansion. And it's going to be critically important to make sure that the $100 million transformer building stays out of the way.
I totally agree with
So
that.
to the extent that some additional incentive is necessary for Tishman to accomplish that, I believe it would be money well spent.
But I'm all in favor.
not Dave's
We are
question.
talking across each other.
Yeah.
I'm all in favor of the more incentive, the better. I'm just saying this is not the place to put the incentive.
Well, let's start from the beginning. So a guaranteed maximum price contract means just that. They guarantee if there's an overrun other than caused by our change order, they eat it. So David's question is, how do we know it's $91 million? Have we executed a contract? Have we had to have Tishman go out for all the bids that comes in at $91 million, or does the GMP end up getting executed at a much higher amount? If it's a higher amount, the fee is going to be higher. So it's not capped at 5%. It's capped at 5% of X, and we don't know what X is. That's exactly the
That's my
question.
point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
That's
so,
not the question.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
point I'm asking.
Sorry.
So,
Okay.
since
Thank you.
If you were here today saying, please approve a GMP of $91 million and a 5% fee, I'd say fine. But you're not saying that. You're saying there's going to be a GMP, and then there's going to be 5% on top of that. And so there's no incentive for them to keep the GMP at the lower price.
Well, in fact, they will build in, as you know, George, they will build in a very significant contingency to make sure that the overrun is not an overrun.
Right.
And then the question is, who gets the contingency if it's not spent? I mean, all of us who are in that business understand this. I think that your question is well taken, and I don't know whether it's appropriate to wait until you have a GMP amount to move this item, or whether you need to move it now, but that is a relevant consideration.
We need to move the item now in order to keep the transformer building on
Right. I think what makes
target.
this different than maybe a normal negotiation of an at-risk contract is that this project is underway. I mean, like Robin said, it's already been, the structure, the steel is up, and so it's an active construction site. We're not negotiating it in advance of the project. We're negotiating it while the project is continuing, and we can't stop the work.
Yeah.
So they have to be entering into these contracts now, and that was our challenge, which made it.
All right, well, why don't we know for the record, this is highly unusual in the real estate development business. That said, we'll seek approval from the directors. Do we have a motion, please?
Motion.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. The motion carries. I thank everybody for participating in today's meeting. Do you know the date yet of the next meeting, Robin?
May 10, it's a little sooner because it will match the OC schedule, and we will be at Javits. But you'll all get fair warning of that again. I will try, to the extent at all possible, to stick to the annual schedule which was circulated to you, and we'll try to give you reminders sufficiently in advance. But it's the previously scheduled May 10th meeting at Javits.
At 1 o'clock?
At 1 o'clock.
Any other questions? Peter, do you have a question?
Just the date on when the price will be known, the maximum.
And we think it's going to be in June.
We expect approximately June. And just to be clear, to the extent that it's not, I guess it should be. If the price goes over the maximum 95, we will be back to you.
Okay.
Okay, if there being no other business, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you very much, everybody. See you in May.